Today we are going to create this X sign-up form only using HTML and CSS. And as you can see, we have those buttons with this hover effect. You can also type in a username, email, or password. You have this next button as well as this forgot password button, and you can click here to sign up. So let's get started. So right here we have this project folder with an index.html, the style.css, and some images. And you can get those images easily just online if you wanted to use the exact same images. So let's start by creating an index.html file, and let's link our CSS file by using link:/CSS. So now we've linked our style sheet. For our style sheet, let's start by using the universal selector and create a margin of 0, a padding of 0, and a box sizing of border box. Next up, let's take a look at the original page. And as you can see, we have this background. So basically you can say that this is a container, and inside of this container, we have another container that contains our input elements. So let's start by creating that. And we are going to say we have a div inside of this body tag, which is our container. So let's say this here is our page. And right inside of this div, we have another container that can, for example, be our class of form minus container. So now we say our page, for example, will have, so let's say dot page will have a width of 100% and a min height of 100 viewport height. Now we also want to use a background, and I have all of the colors in this colors.txt file, and we're just going to copy this background color right here. So we're going to save the page. And as you can see, now we have this background effect. Also, we want to center this form container inside of this page, inside of this page container. So let's say dot form container will have a padding of maybe 40 pixels and a background of maybe white. So now we'll also say that this one will have a display of flags, a justify content of center, and align items of center. So this one is centered to the center of the screen. Next up, we need to use some form input fields to really make this look like the original one. So we're going to say that we will have this close button to the top as well as this X element. So let's start by styling that. We're going to go inside of our index.html. Inside of this form container, we are saying that we are having a div. Inside of this div, we will have a button, for example, and inside of this button, we will use an image tag that points to our images folder and to this close one.png icon, which is basically just a close button. So as you can see, now we have this close button. We will also say that our class has a class of close minus btn. Now we will style this close button inside of our style sheet by setting dot close button. We'll have a border of 0, a background of transparent, and this should look a lot better already. Now we'll say that our image, we are going to give this one a class of close minus image, for example. We will say that this one will have a width of maybe, let's say, 20 pixels, and this looks a lot better already. And now we want to have the X icon, the X image, right next to this button. So we'll say this one is an image, points to our images folder, and we are going to load our X logo.svg icon, which will also get a class of logo minus image, for example. We will take this logo image and style it inside of our CSS file by saying this one has a width of maybe also 20 pixels. But as you can see on the original page, this one is slightly bigger. So let's give this one a width of maybe 35 pixels. And now this looks a lot better already. Now, as you can see, this container probably has a width of approximately 500 pixels, I would say. So in order to create this container, we're going to say that we will have, for this form container, we will have a max width of 500 pixels. And by default, we are going to say we want to have a width of 80%. So it either takes up 80% of the available space or 500 pixels if available. For the padding of the form, we are only going to use 20 pixels. We're also going to say that we want to have a border radius of maybe 20 pixels as well. And now we need to have some space between those items. And now for our close image, let's maybe just say this one is pretty much all right. But for our logo image, let's say this one should have a position of absolute. So we need a position of relative for another element. So we'll say position of relative for our form container, like so. And now we can say to the left, we want to have 50% of space. And let's say to the top, we want to have 5 pixels of space. And now we can increase this to maybe 15 pixels. So now this looks pretty good. But now, as you can see, we push this 50% from the left. So as you can see, it really starts once 50% of the available space is basically gone. So it starts 50% from the left, and obviously since this has some width as well, it looks like it's not really centered. So what we have to do is we have to take this item and move this 50% of its own width basically to the left again. So we are going to use transform, translate X, and we say let's move this by 50% of its own width to the left, and now it's perfectly centered. Hope this makes sense. Next up, as you can see, we have those elements right here aligned below each other. So we're going to use another div wrapper for all of those items. So let's go in there. Let's say we have a form right here. Inside of this form, we have an h2 element, for example, that says sign in to X. So we're going to say sign in to X, for example. Right below, we had a button that says sign in with Google. So sign in with Google, and right below we had another button that says sign in with Apple. So we're going to take this one and say sign in with Apple. Right below we have this OR field, and it's actually easier to create that one than you think. So we're going to say right below we have a div. Instead of this div, we have another div and another div and a paragraph right between those divs, and this one has an OR text essentially. Now we need this input field, and right below we need a button and another button again. So let's start to create an input field of type text. It says phone minus email minus username. We can actually use the exact same thing for the ID, and for the placeholder we can say phone colon email or username. So the user can use whatever he wants. Right below we had a button, and that one said next, and then we have one with forget password. So let's say next, copy that one, and forgot password question mark. Now we also need this don't have an account sign up section. So we're going to create another div right below. This one says don't have an account yet question mark, an anchor tag right here, and sign up. So as you can see, now we have all of the necessary things, but they are pretty much looking terrible. So in order to change that, we will give this one here our form. We will give this one a class of form. And now we're going to style this form. So let's say dot form takes up a width of maybe 80% of the available space. This one will also have a margin of auto, so it's centered. A margin of top maybe of 20 pixels. And maybe we're going to use something like 50. I don't know how it looks on the original page, but they have some space at least to the top. So maybe 50 pixels is alright. For the font, we are going to use font minus family for our entire body. So we'll say body font family. Let's use system UI Apple whatever. So we get this font, which looks pretty similar in my opinion. Now we need to create the sign in with Google button. And as you can see, all of those buttons have a pretty similar style. And as you can see, all of those buttons have the pretty much exact same body. So they all have padding top, padding bottom, they have round borders and so on. So we'll create a general button, and then we will just create some different styles for this button. So we'll say border radius 30 pixels, for example. And now let's also say that we want to have padding top bottom 10 pixels. So padding and left right basically doesn't really matter. And now we can use this button and give this button to our next button, to this button, also to this sign in with Google button. So we'll say class button, and to this sign in with Apple button. So we'll say button right here as well. And now we need to create the different buttons. So I have some colors here, and I will say this one is dot black minus btn, and we will give this one the color that is basically equal to this color right here. So let's copy that one and put it in here. And our black button is essentially our forget password button. So we'll say black button. And as you can see, now we have this button right here, and we need to adjust some things for our button. So we are going to go ahead and say that the button should have by default a border of 0, width of 100%, so it takes up all of the available space, like so. And as you can see now, it looks pretty similar already from the original style. Our black button should obviously have a background of black and a color of white. Like this, it already looks a little bit better. Maybe we can also say that we want to have a padding top bottom of 13 pixels. or let's use 12. If we take a look at the original page, we also have a font minus weight of bold for this button. Now we can go ahead and do the same for our .next button. So let's say .next button and change that one. Let's go inside of our colors. And now let's take this gray color in here. We are going to say background is equal to this gray color, that one. We will have a font minus weight of bold. And we also need to use this next button to really see the effect. So we'll give this one a class of button and next button. So now we have this effect. And I think a color of white would be a little bit better. But actually I made a mistake. So essentially our next button has a black background. And our forgot password button actually just has a border. So we need to change that. So we'll say this one, our black button does not have this one. Is our, let's call this one password button. Let's copy that one. Let's give this one the password button. We are going to save it. For this button, we need to use a background of transparent and a border of 1 pixel solid. And now we need to get from our colors.txt our gray color. So we'll copy that one. Or let's use input border because I think it was the input border. And we are going to copy that one in here. And now we have this input border. And now for our color, we need to remove white because we want to have a black color. And now it looks like this. So a lot closer already. Also for every button, I want to have a cursor of pointer. So it looks a little bit better. And now we need to start to create this sign in with Google button. And as you can see, we have this button right here that says sign in with Google. But to the left, I would also like to have an image tag that points to our images folder and to our google.png. So we have this logo and we are going to say class login icon, or let's call this icon for now. We are going to target this icon inside of our style sheet by using .icon. We say this one has a width of 20 pixels. So as you can see, this is a lot better already. I'm also going to wrap that one inside of a paragraph, for example, for now. So we have this effect, and this button class, let's also create a class of flex, and we're just going to say this one should have a .flex display flex, like so. And now we are going to create .justify minus center, justify content center, and .items center, align items of center, .gap minus 1 of gap of 10 pixels. So now we can use those classes to style this one. So let's use flex, justify center, we justified it in the center, item center to align them in the center, and gap minus 1 to get a small gap. So now we have this effect. And now we can reuse those classes for the other item. So let's just copy actually this button, paste it in here. We just have to change this Google image to this Apple logo, and we can sign in with Apple, and we can use the exact same classes, and now we have the exact same effect. Obviously, this button does not look like the original one right here, so we have to say, okay, we need to have a white background, or basically a transparent background, and a little border. So we will say, let's just call this button minus transparent, for example, and we will use the same color for this second button, and let's style this inside of our CSS style sheet, and we're going to say this one has a background that is transparent, and let's just use the exact same border color that we've used right here. We're going to save that. Now we have this button effect. Also, I think it would actually be even better if the icon would be slightly smaller, because it takes up a little bit too much space. So 15, 17, yeah, just experiment with those values, but I think this works pretty much all right. And for the button, I'm also going to define a max height because those ones look pretty weird. So I'm going to say max height, let's try 40 pixels. And maybe we say 45, and that should then, yeah, let's say 40 pixels because this limits them to a pretty good height in my opinion. And yeah, as you can see, now we also need to style our input field, and I'm just going to say .input. Maybe you can come up with a better name, but for me this works right now. So I'm going to say width 100%. And let's also take a look. We have some padding top bottom, so especially padding top bottom. We have some border radius So let's say padding 15 pixels top bottom, let's say 0 left right. Let's use probably border radius. The borders were pretty subtle, so we'll say 5 pixels. We're going to use this class for our input element, so let's use class input. Now we have this effect. Maybe we can start to style this. Let's say 5 pixels left right, maybe 17 right there. Border is probably the exact same border that we've used before, so let's use that border right here as well. We want to have an outline of none basically, and now we get this effect. Now, as you can see, we have a lot of gaps between those items, so actually pretty big gaps. So I'm just going to create the class gap -2, and I'll say gap 20 pixels. I'm going to use this gap for the entire input form, and we will say for our form container, or let's just say for our form, we will have a class. We have a class of form. Let's use gap -2. And flex to make this basically happen, and flex -column, which we don't have yet, I think. So I'm going to go inside of our style sheet. Let's create .flex column, flex direction of column. Now everything should be aligned in a column, as you can see, and this looks a lot better already and pretty similar to the original form, at least I would say. And here we'll have a font -lg, so we'll create that class. We'll say .font -lg will have a font size of, let's say, 1.5 rem. Let's take a look at this. Let's say 1.6 probably. Now we have this effect, looks a lot better to me. And now this here is missing, and this here is basically missing to really create a pretty cool input field. So we can go ahead and say this or field, we can give this one a class. Where is it? This one should have a class of flex and a gap of maybe 1. And now you really have to think about it like this. This one is a container. This one is to the left. This one is a container. This one is to the right. If they are able to take up all of the available space, let me show you. We are going to create .grow1. This makes it a little bit easier. Grow flex grow of 1. We are going to use grow class grow -1 for that one. And we will also use grow -1 for that one. So basically both of the divs are invisible, but they take up all of the available space. So this one takes up this space, this one takes up this space, and we have the or in the center. We have a little gap between those divs basically and the text. So now if we give this one a border top, for example, and this one a border top, it should look pretty nice. And I'm going to show you how this looks. So let's say border, and we will say border. Let's just copy actually this border right here. And instead of border, we are going to say border -top, for example. And now we'll use .border for both of these divs. So let's say this one has grow1 border, grow1 border. And now we have those borders. Now it would also make sense to make items -center to center this one right here, or center everything. And let's also say that we want to create a color, maybe gray color. So let's say .gray. .gray has maybe this color right here, because we could probably need it for our text. We are going to say color is equal to this hash code. We are going to copy gray, and we are going to paste gray right in here for our or class, like so. And now we have this gray effect. But actually I just saw that the original one doesn't even have a gray effect, so yeah, you can just keep it like this. Actually this here also looks a little bit weird, so I'm just going to say, okay, this paragraph has a class of or text. Probably, yeah, pretty bad name, but should work for this tutorial. So let's say margin bottom 1 pixel, for example, or let's say 3 pixels, 4 pixels, and now it looks a little more centered. And now all that is essentially missing is this don't have an account yet, sign up. And as you can see, we also have a little more margin to the bottom, so we are going to create .mb minus, let's use maybe 6 to create margin bottom of 60 pixels. Oops, 60 like so. And we are going to copy this class and use mb bottom for this wrapper div essentially. And now as you can see, we have a little bit of margin. If we go into a full screen, you can see that this looks pretty similar already to the original form. And all we really have to do is we have to use this gray text and this blue text. So let's go ahead and let's say .gray. We already have .gray, so let's create .blue. And now I'm also going to take blue from this style sheet or this text element right here. We say color is equal to this blue hash code. we will use a class of gray for our paragraph and a class of blue for our anchor tag. Now it looks like this. And actually we just get this underline once we hover. So we can change that by saying dot underline minus none, text decoration none, dot hover minus underline colon hover gets text decoration of underline. So now we are just going to copy this class and underline minus none. So by default we have underline minus none, and once we hover we get underline or hover underline. Now we have this effect, and as you can see, once we hover we get this underline. And as you can see right here, we also have those hover effects essentially. So we could, for example, say for our transparent, where is it, transparent button transparent, let's copy that one. Let's say colon button transparent hover. Once we hover we want to change our background basically to maybe this light blue button color. So I'm going to copy that one. Let's say hashtag, that is the color. Once we hover, I'm going to take a look at our input feed, and as you can see now we have this hover effect. And obviously you can do the exact same thing for this one, for example. So if you wanted to say, for example, our next button, for example, colon next button colon hover, once we're going, or I think it's a password button to be honest. Once we hover, we want to change our background from maybe transparent to, let's just use this one. And yeah, let's copy the entire code because this is obviously off. So now we have this effect. Let's hover over this one, and as you can see now we have this light color. Really hope you learned something and hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and hope you have a great day, guys.